You who were on some earlier talks, you might have heard that on October 31st, at the sub courtyard in the back of the building, we are going to be having a community event that will be celebrating the Day of Death. It's called the Day of Death Art Project, and this is coordinated by a number of people, including Dean Cesar Barca. So we hope that you can participate in this ephemeral art making project, which will be a celebration of the transitory nature of life. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today. And Dr. Siri Khalsa is an assistant professor of nursing and has taught at Highland since fall of 2016. She lives with her family in Espanola and has worked as a nurse in northern New Mexico for 37 years. And we really appreciate the fact that she has chosen that as a profession and is helping us here in New Mexico, especially in northern New Mexico, where health professionals are so much needed and appreciated. So with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Khalsa, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Okay, my topic is gratitude, generosity, grit, and hope, a concept of lived disability. And this topic came to me out of my dissertation topic, which was the lived experiences of parenting adult children with developmental disabilities. And I had done a hermeneutic, interpretive phenomenological study of parenting of this population. And one of the things that is real important is to know the history of where we were and how far we've come in caring for this population. And this quote from Mollets is, I thought, an important one, in that hermeneutics is a lesson in humility. It has wrestled with the angels of darkness and has not gotten the better of them. The echoes of histories are always inadvertently and deliberately inviting us into both the past and new ways of being in the present. We live in a world that recedes into the past and extends into the future. Therefore, we need to remember, recollect, and recall it. This is not an episthesiological quest, but an ontological one, as we are historical. And when I was doing my dissertation, this quote came to light as I was navigating my topic. And as part of the background, it's important to know where we came from. And in the last couple of centuries of history, society has medicalized disability and the creation of institutions for individuals seen as medically damaged. Early physicians maintained quasi-scientific views for disability, such as phrenology or negative religious-inspired beliefs about disability, resulting in the torture-like treatments and harsh conditions as cures. For example, they used to use leeches to extract blood from these individuals as a way of purification. And it's important to understand this history in order to see what was done in the past and how far we've come. Phenology is the measurement of cranial lumps and bumps as indicators of mental traits. And institutional living in the United States for individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities began in 1848 and reached a peak in 1967, and it involved almost 200,000 people. Before that, this population was either cared for by family or they were abandoned into the greater communities. Willowbrook is a state school that's now the College of Staten Island, and it became the symbol of deinstitutionalization back in the 1970s when Gerardo Rivera and Jane Curtin in 1971 and 72 they were both journalists. They wrote about the conditions of Willowbrook. And this was after Robert Kennedy had visited the site in 1967 and said it was a snake pit. And it was an example of what institutional living was creating and how these people were cared for. Back in the mid 1800s, institutions were places of education like the Perkins School for the Blind and then the Jalot School for the Deaf. And there were places of training, but that changed over time where it became more custodial care. And the care became not the type of care we would want for our loved ones. Now, disability is a socially construct. And the history is an institutional history based on the idea that different societies build institution to deal with or accommodate disability. And there was this change in philosophy from training schools to custodial institutions. This all changed back in 1960s with the Community Mental Health Act of 1963, and then the enactment of Medicaid and Medicare in 1965, and then the Home and Community-Based Services in 1981. And the Home and Community-Based Services is a federal law that is funded through Medicaid but managed by the states. And this provides money for this population to be cared for either in the home environment or in small group homes. Oops. Seems like I can't have some slides. Okay. Now, by 2018, 17 states had closed their large institutions, New Mexico being one of them. And New Mexico had 2 state-run institutions for this population, with the last one, Fort Stanton, closing in 1997. Now, grit is what Angela Duckworth calls the power of passion and perseverance, sorry. It's a calling, showing up, being present. And I felt that this concept was manifested by the population that I had interviewed. They had interest. They had a passion for taking care of their children who are now adults. There was the capacity to practice, which is one form of perseverance, because they practiced every day in how to care for this population. They had a purpose. They had a conviction that after they got over their shock of being parents of children who had a different journey and who society still, there is a stigma to caring for this population, like the parents must have done something wrong. But then there was this hope that they arose to the occasion every day that they took care of their population, and grit grows from the inside out. So some of the quotes that I had gotten from my parents is that we've become a little more pragmatic in this life, being a marathon versus a sprint. And this was a mother who cared for her adult son with her husband, and they also had a second son. And they realized over time that this was a day-to-day journey, that it wasn't a sprint, and that they had to develop skill sets to maintain this marathon. Another parent said, once your child's there, you quickly put that behind you. You get to work. My wife's a great researcher looking for alternatives and anything we can find. And this set of parents, they knew that they were having a child with Down syndrome before the child was born. And so they got to work right away researching how they could care for this individual. The next quote is by a mother whose oldest son has autism. And this child had all of these self-injurious behaviors, banging his head against the concrete. Whenever she would try to intervene, he would be biting her, hitting her. And she was taking this child to the ER several days in a row, and nobody could help her. And she just felt this frustration and helplessness. But how she navigated this is that she made it her mission to care for this child. She did ask for help from her mother. She became a social worker, and then through her advocacy began to do public speaking about her lived experience. Some parents found energy and strength through their faith. Sometimes you don't know how to cope. And she just dove deep into her soul to find answers, fortitude, and courage. Another mother explained that her daughter almost died several times when she was in her mid-20s, and that it was very difficult to accept something like this, and it was overwhelming. And they felt helpless in how to take care of the adult daughter. But through advocacy and really researching the system, they were able to find and turn this scenario around where her daughter was happy. And her daughter is now in her late 30s. Another parent, as a sign of grit and keeping the family unit together, they love to go and walk in nature. And so they would visit the state and national parks. But because her son had cerebral palsy and was wheelchair bound, they couldn't do it as a family. So how this family unit would navigate this love of nature within their unique situation was that they would have the younger daughter and the father would go and walk the trails in the morning while the mother watched the son at the hotel. And then in the afternoon, the father would watch the son, and the mother and the daughter would go and walk the same trails. And the daughter was like a bridge in communicating what was talked about in the morning with her mother. And so that's how they held their family together. Another parent, a father who was a professional and a professor, he basically stated he had to carve out 3 to 4 hours a day for himself, and that he made it his mission not to make autism as the family identifier, that he had to do things for himself as well as then carving out time for his son, and that it was so important to step away from the diagnosis of autism as the identity of the family or the identity of the child. So all these parents had gratitude for their experience, even though their experience was very heartfelt and they struggled. And gratitude is a positive emotion, involves being thankful and appreciative, associated with several mental and physical health benefits, creates feelings of kindness, warmth, and other forms of generosity. And gratitude helps you notice the positives in life and reminds us what's important, encourages us to live in the present moment, reducing comparison of ourselves to others, and boosts your mood and strengthens relationships. So some of the quotes that I found from my narratives that is in support of gratitude are, one mother said she was blessed to have this child. This child needed someone who had the ability to fight for him, to think about him, to educate him, and to be there for him. And what this mother explained, and she was one of my older parents that I interviewed, and she was widowed. She was part of the armed forces in her early years and now was teaching. And her son at the time of the interviews was 43 years old and was diagnosed with mental retardation. And she remembers the story that was written in the newspaper back in the 1960s of a father who was caring for a son who also had mental retardation. And the father was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And he was in so much despair that he shot his son and he shot himself because he knew no one would be taking care of his child. And that story just resonated with this mom and she felt she was blessed to have this job, because she says our children are not jobs, they are human beings and they deserve quality care. Another mother who had a daughter born with Down syndrome expressed her acceptance and gratitude for her daughter after 2 heart surgeries. And the medical professionals felt like her daughter was not going to do well in life. And she basically was so grateful that her daughter made it through the second surgery. And now, at the time of the interviews, her daughter was like 37 or 38. And she just had this unconditional love and gratefulness that her daughter chose to live. And as she says, we're still rocking and rolling. I'm so grateful. Another quote in support of gratitude is, what you have to do is learn how they are. And many times I had one interview where the mother started out trying to change her child, trying to find things that would change her daughter's diagnosis. And she came to a place of, well, I'm trying to change you and you're perfect the way you are. And that's what many of these parents came to, that place of acceptance and gratitude that their child and now adult was who they were, and they were progressing in life at the skill sets that they could do. This mother who had a daughter that had 2 heart surgeries said, I'm grateful she was born in 1983 versus 1963, because if you remember history, back in the 60s, the medical professionals were suggesting that this population be institutionalized, that the family should just relinquish their care and forget that they had this individual in their life. And then there was this couple that I interviewed, and they had 5 children. And the father said that when he was back in the 60s, he remembered this movie called Then Came Bromston, which was a motorcycle movie where the main character took care of an autistic child. And when he saw that movie, he said, wow, I want to do that. And he was blessed with 3 children with intellectual disabilities. Now, but he and his wife lost a child, their second child, to a congenital disability, and the child died in infancy. And it was such a traumatic experience for them to navigate the healthcare systems, to be on the receiving end of the stigma of having a child with genetic situations, that when his other 3 children came and they were also having intellectual disabilities, although physically they looked perfectly fine, he was just grateful that they could breathe. And that was the pinpoint source of his gratitude. So with generosity, it's a quality of giving time and money, food and kindness to others in need, honesty and patience. And all of these parents had generosity of their time, generosity in sharing their experiences, generosity in caring for their individuals up until into adulthood. And one of the mothers talked about, and she was a strong advocate. She was teaching, she was sharing her experiences, and she actually stepped away from a profession in order to care for her son with cerebral palsy. And her son, by the time he was 2 years old, had 22 different neurological surgeries and was placed on hospice. And he was in his 20s when we interviewed the family. And she remembers this time when she was in the hospital and he was going to go for his first shunt surgery. And there was another mother in the waiting room. And she basically says, my daughter had a shunt for years. Do you want to feel it? And this mother can still remember this other mother placing her hand over her hand and help guiding her to where the shunt was as an act of kindness. And she always remembers that time when this other mother reached out to her. And she in turn, over her time, shared her experiences and did a lot of advocacy. There was tag teaming going on with some of the parents and then also parents and caregivers, where if one would say, I need a little time alone, somebody would step in and show generosity in taking over the burden of care. The father of the son who had cerebral palsy, there was a generosity in trying to manage, well, how much medication to sedate him because he had some severe seizure activity, and how much to sedate him and also to give him quality of care. And it was a real fine balancing act. And it was the parents' generosity to try to find a balance between total sedation, where he would just be sleeping all the time, to having enough sedation where his seizures would be under control, but he could be present. And with hope is what enables us to keep going in the face of adversity. It is what one desires to happen, but must be prepared to work hard to make it so. And this is a quote from Jane Goodall. The motivation to overcome adversity, it lies at the heart of energy that propels people towards self-actualization, achieving the highest vision of themselves for the good of their families, themselves, their communities, and the greater humanity. It's the quality residing in the human spirit. And hope, when grounded in realism about one's situation, may give the strength to manage the complexities of illness and the associated emotional challenges, facilitate at least psychological well-being and improve quality of life. And one of the mothers shared her thought of the concept of good enough. And I really thought about this quote, because what is good enough for that moment in time? And that gave her hope to keep on going, because she would have to think outside of the box. And this mother actually put her own career on hold while her son was starting at the age of 3 through about 8. And she homeschooled, she got the training to do this particular ABA therapy, which is quite expensive. She shared that she probably spent a college degree on her first son to train to do this training that was recommended by the science community. And accepting their adult child with DDID as they are, instead of finding ways to fix them. And this was an enlightening moment for a mom who felt she had to try to find the solution to fix her daughter. And then she came to the realization that her daughter was perfect the way she was, and that she turned her energies into advocacy. And this one family that I interviewed, their daughter was born at 26 weeks and had severe cerebral palsy. And the medical physicians felt that they should take her off the ventilator and just let her go. And the family prayed that to take care of her, because they felt that even though they knew the challenges, that she was a gift. And when I interviewed this family, their daughter was in her mid-30s and was just the light of light. And the family felt that their daughter left her print, and that a lot of people knew her because the family themselves had included her in all these activities. The family was quite into including her in the schools and making sure that people understood her. And they told the stories of how the other children accepted their daughter, who was wheelchair bound, throughout her school age years. So thank you very much for listening. And if there are any questions, it'd be great. Okay. Oh, okay, Dr. Linder.
Hi, Siri. Thank you very much for the talk. Just a quick question. In terms of dealing with, in terms of confronting the challenges that parents face in keeping a child with sometimes profound challenges, is what would you say are the most important determinants of success in that? Because I have friends and even relatives who've struggled to some degree with children who are differently abled developmentally or physically, and some of them have really had a very hard time. Is there do you see a sort of common denominator about what makes for more success? And again, success obviously is going to be defined in a variety of ways, but
well, having support by the family, by others in the family and communities is important. We still have this stigma that when a family has a child that's differently abled, that somehow or another the parents have done something wrong. Instead of, as a society, looking at, okay, what do we as a society need to learn as individuals and as group in order to support this individual and have true inclusion. And one of the parents had said, first off, he said, well, what did we do to upset God? So that whole belief system of we're being punished because we have a child that's different. And so it's like really retraining individuals and communities that, each child is perfect the way they are. What are the supports that we need to have? And the supports have to come from